Welcome to the Coping Podcast, where we share strategies for coping with the stressors of life, especially the difficulties of parenting. And here is your host, Dr. Lee Weiss.
This is Dr. Lee Weiss. I am the host of the Coping Podcast, where I feature top experts on topics like raising healthy children, parenting, and so much more. Past guests include dietitian Lara Field, trauma therapist Dr. Michelle Cutler, and neuropsychologist Dr. Lisa Novak. This episode is brought to you by Coping Partners. Coping Partners is a mental health practice in the Chicago suburbs dedicated to helping children, adolescents, and adults. We help manage various challenges, including anxiety, divorce, behavioral issues, relationship problems, and much more. Check out more episodes of our podcast and our website at copingpartners.com, and you can contact us with any questions you have. Just a quick disclaimer, the information provided is for educational and informational purposes only. This is not intended to provide mental health treatment and does not constitute a client-therapist relationship. The information provided is not a replacement for being assessed and evaluated by a licensed professional and is not intended to replace mental health or medical advice. Before introducing today's guest, I wanted to give a big thank you to Lynn Scheiman, who I met at Jewish Child and Family Services, because she actually introduced Ben and me, and I'm so grateful for her for training me and connecting us. So now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest. Ben Kessler is a licensed clinical social worker who has over 10 years of experience working with children ages 6 and up, adolescents, adults, and families. He received his Master's of Social Work from Loyola University. Ben worked at the Jewish Child and Family Services as a clinician, clinical supervisor, and assistant director of outpatient adult child and family services. And now we're very lucky to have him at Coping Partners. So thank you so much, Ben, for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Lee.
I think the topic of technology and kids and teens is one of the trickiest for parents to navigate. Because as parents, it's our job to keep kids safe and healthy. And we know that technology can be really fraught with negative consequences. But at the same time, it's not going away. So maybe, Ben, you could start by just sharing with us some of the concerns that you have about teens and kids growing up with social media and technology and some of the negative repercussions you've seen.
Yeah, Lee, it's such an important topic. It seems like every so often, someone who leaves Google or one of the major companies goes on 60 Minutes or something like that and reveals the inner workings of what's happening in these big companies. And it's important for us to know how this is affecting our minds and how it's affecting children. And so when I'm talking to parents, I'm trying to help them understand what technology is. Technology is a tool that's supposed to help us achieve a specific outcome or goal. And when technology changes in our life, or especially in children's lives, it can affect their mood, behavior, and how they interact with the world around them. And it goes from being a tool to something far different in their mind. And then it affects the family system in ways that parents couldn't anticipate. And that's when they typically contact us.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about, we hear the term technology addiction thrown around.
Sure.
And I think as parents from even a young age, we've seen what happens when they get their first sort of glimpse of the iPad and, the tantrums that ensue when it's taken away from them. But tell us a little bit about what this really looks like, in kids and teens and what people come to you for and how you manage that.
Yeah. So I think some of the early symptoms or signs that we see is our children, adolescents, teens, young adults, even adults who are experiencing a low or depressed mood, irritability, especially in children, frustration, annoyance with simple everyday tasks that they're typically able to complete, and inability or outright refusal to take the next steps in life that would really get them where they want to be and need to be for their progression and developmental stages of life. And so I think what we see is really a lot of irritability in children, a lot of anger and upset, especially when the device or this tool is being talked about possibly being taken away or restricted. And I think when we see that reaction so disproportionate to the situation, that's when we really we always want to take it seriously, but that's when we want to think more deeply about it.
And what is that about? I mean, we've all seen it, right? You take it away and the kid screams. What is going on in that moment for them? It feels so out of control.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen it in my office here. I've seen it with my children's friends. And I think I've experienced it on my own. And I think these tools mean so many different things to us. It's hard to exactly pinpoint it. But what it is giving us is instant gratification. It's soothing our mind, and it's helping us distract or avoid from certain situations or feelings that we're not ready to be in touch with, or we've gotten used to not managing or dealing with. And so when that is taken, we're confronted with a reality that we haven't faced or we possibly don't want to think about. And so we are going to use all that we can, our affect, our behavior, to let those around us know how upset we are. And when we're children, we know that our parents are here to take care of us. And so we're going to let them know through any way that we can. We're dysregulated. Children are dysregulated. So it's hard for them to sit down and say, Mom and Dad, when you take this away from me, I get so angry and upset. So it's much more easier for them to grab something, throw it at the wall, tell them that they hate them, use words that they've never heard them use before, that they're never even sure where they heard them, and to kind of go bananas. And I think we have to begin to make sense of that and understand that this reaction it's more than just a toy. It's something that means more to them. When I start to talk to, junior high, or I guess now it's middle school still, or it's always junior high to me, and high school age students, what they share is, Ben, this is the future. How could you talk about taking away my livelihood from me? And I that always gives me pause, because we always want to take people seriously, and I do take them seriously. And I don't want to jump to saying, oh, come on, give it a break, because that's so invalidating. And so I try to help them think that this technology, this future isn't going away.
Right.
But if we don't have, and this is an important word for today, Lee, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, a healthy relationship to technology, the device or these tools won't work the way that we want them to. And we won't. And so, well, part of our mind is saying, well, I need to learn, I need to use technology. I need to keep using it because this is what I'm going to do in my future. And I'm getting practice and experience. We also need to think about the limits, because even if this is our future, we're not working all the time. We're not staying up till 4 a.m. playing. We're not skipping school to use technology or devices. So we really have to think, what is our relationship and what does it mean to us?
Well, and it is, if you think of the phone or the iPad for a younger kid, I mean, it is like this entryway into a whole nother world. And I want to say it's a fantasy world, but it's not, for these middle schoolers, like you said, or, for sure, by high school. I mean, their entire social lives, much of it is on the phone. So it is a little bit of a tricky dance to do, for parents. But definitely we've seen what happens when there's no limits at all. And we see kids unravel, and we see kids. I know in my office, I've had kids say that they sleep in the bedroom with their phone, and they think that their parents don't, or the parents don't necessarily know, they say, but they say that friends will call, or, they'll have like a notification pop up at 3 a.m, and they'll actually wake up and check it. And if it's something benign, they might just go back to sleep. But if it's something more about a friend or something more just upsetting, it could keep them up for the rest of the night. So it clearly disrupts sleep, mood, all of this. And there's just no boundary even for sleeping, for example.
Such great points, Lee. That's right. When we think of children or all individuals, we think of functioning. So when we think of children, young adults, we want to think of the settings that they live in, their home life, their school life, their social life, and extracurricular life. And when we are so focused on using these devices, our behavior is impaired, and we can't engage in those settings the way that we want to. And we can't have a healthy sleep schedule, and it affects our eating. And so there goes our sleep hygiene, and there goes possibly our hygiene itself, because we may choose not to bathe and
Oh,
so that we can game. And so exactly those
right.
stinky kids, right? And so we won't find a way to help them understand what's happening to their mind. And it's so hard for them to do that because they're so fused to it. You're right. When you brought that up, sleeping with their phone, waking up at 3 a.m, we hear typically things that maybe adults think of, oh, that's sweet, like something with Snapchat, keeping a streak alive. Well,
Mhm.
that's nice, but to what end? And what
Right.
limit are we willing to take it?
Right.
And if we miss it, what does that feel like internally? And
Mm.
how can we sit with that feeling and understand it without thinking that we're going to lose friendships? The stakes have gotten too high.
Right. Right. So what I'm hearing is we need to pay really close attention to the boundary of technology in our homes and in our lives. And, as parents, we need to work on teaching this from a fairly young age, given how prevalent the technology is, even for younger kids. So I guess, what do you think the best advice is for parents to help their teens or children, even if you want to start younger, have a healthy relationship with technology or with screens?
Great question. I don't think there's one specific way, but when I'm talking with parents and children, I talk about introducing it.
Mhm.
And I call this the long preamble. And I suppose I'm about to do this with you now, Lee, but it's how parents can do it with their children. And we begin by talking about what is technology? Let's define it. Not like we're going to sit down in class and lecture someone and fall asleep. We don't need to do that, but we need to define what this is. And that's why I think of technology as a tool that's designed to help us achieve a specific goal. And
Mhm.
there's a time or a limit that's connected to it.
Mhm.
Adults use it with GPS apps. I know I need it to go wherever I'm going, but that app eventually is closed. If I'm
Mhm.
listening to a podcast like this one, eventually it will end.
Mhm.
If I'm looking at the weather, eventually I won't just cycle through weeks and weeks and weeks. I'll know what I need to know and I'll close it. So when I think relating to children, showing how an adult uses technology is a way to model or explain what it means and how and what that is. Now, when we
Mhm.
switch over to gaming or YouTube, Twitch, any of these types of things, we want to help them understand that there's the same, they just look different. And they look different because these companies are very good at what they do. The psychology behind
Mhm.
the addiction, the word that we're using today,
Right.
is very confusing. The public doesn't know what it is because the law and regulation is so far behind it. We've known this for decades, and it's going to continue to be this way. And
Mhm.
so, because we don't know this, we explain to children we still don't know everything. But what we do know is that if we use too much of this tool, it will have negative effects. It won't get us what we want it to get. It won't help us achieve what we want to achieve. It
Right.
will have negative gains. It
Right.
will upset us. It will cause irritability. It will cause upset. And then we go back to the word relationship. What is my relationship to technology? Well, it helps me achieve a goal and I have fun and I talk with my friends. Okay. What, what about your relationships with the people in your life? Your family, your friends, your teachers, your neighbors, people in your
Mhm.
community? Are those lacking or suffering?
Mm.
And sometimes the children we work with, Lee, right? They'll say, well, Ben, I don't have active friends. I don't have friends in person. These are the people that I do connect with. And we
Which
have to
which probably
understand.
makes it all the more addicting. Right.
Yes, because why do we want to let go of something where we feel confident and secure? Or if we're
Mhm.
gaming, where we feel a sense of mastery and confidence and our self esteem is booming. So we have to really understand and validate that. And we have to take time to help children understand what that means to them. And then comes the harder parts.
Well,
That's when we
before
have
before you get to the harder parts, I wanted to add one thing in here. Sometimes you'll see the kids scrolling, whether it's Instagram or, I mean, TikTok, any of these things, YouTube, even YouTube Kids. And it's like, because it's like Netflix, because you liked this, right? You'll like this.
oh, the
And you
algorithm.
see that the algorithms, and you see that sort of the screen is now dictating kind of where they go. So I've had teenage girls, for example, in my office who are struggling with body image. And they might, have typed in something about a diet or their legs being big and what exercises could they do to slim down their legs. And before you know it, every single fad diet or every single thing about not eating pops onto their screen. So I often try to talk to them about look, I know this is appealing, right? Because it's obviously partly what you're typing in and you're interested in, but who's in control now? Is it you and are you typing in what you want, or is it actually something else like digging you deeper into this place? So I don't know. I think in terms of limits, I start to say to kids and teens, try to remember, right? Are you driving this, or are you just kind of sifting along, scrolling, and you don't even know how you got to where you are? And to me, that's a distinction too between like healthy and unhealthy.
Well, such a great point, Lee. That's right. Some of the smartest people in the world are working on these algorithms, and they figured out how to get to us and how to get to children. And yeah, when I'm talking with children, I ask them, "What are you watching? What are you into?" Whatever it tells me to watch. That they have given up their agency.
Right.
It's beyond consumerism and marketing. This is about what some formula we don't understand is telling them to do. And like you said, it isn't. It often does not lead to healthy choices or healthy content. It's something that these algorithms understand what that mind may seek and what will keep it watching. So it may start out as, "Hey, I feel insecure. How can I make more friends?" Could turn into, "This is why you don't have friends and why society is against you,"
Mm.
especially in the age of disinformation.
Right.
We won't make this political, but within this age of disinformation, there's lots of ways to pull on people's heart and minds and send them into directions that they wouldn't typically go into, that result into a whole new type of presenting problem or series of symptoms or issues that we're trying to help them understand.
Right. Right. So, in terms of healthy limits, again, kind of going back to parenting, what would you say? Is it a time limit? Is it you know, a contract that the child signs when they first get a phone? I mean, what are some kind of practical tidbits you can give for parents?
Yeah. Ideally, what we're thinking is that for video gaming, for video
Mhm.
games, kids aren't playing the kids are only playing on the weekends. They're not playing on the weekdays. Many people will say that's unrealistic. And I often hear it from parents, both parents who work, say, "Well, my kid's older. They don't need a babysitter. I came home, I watched TV. What's the big deal? They're just playing a video
Mhm.
game." And I think to myself, well, I did the same. I get that. But then I think I had my friends over. And I
Mhm.
wonder with the parents, can they have friends over? No, 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 that's not the way things work anymore. So I
Mhm.
think to them, so I try to wonder with them, to wonder with their children, how can we find a limit there? How can we find a healthy balance? So if the weekends, the goal is to have 2 45-minute windows to game, on the weekdays, can we play for 30 minutes? Now, oftentimes the children will say, well, that's not enough time for a full game. And then my response is, can you practice? Because if the point of this tool is to achieve a goal of completing the game or defeating a boss or moving up a level or anything like that,
Mhm.
we need to practice. So let's
Mhm.
practice a little each day, get that joy, and then let's move away from it.
Mhm.
So I would say on the weekdays, the expectations would be we come home, we we get organized, we have a snack, we relax, we do our homework, and then we're allowed to game, if at all. And
Right.
then we're allowed to,
If we have time,
if at
if
all.
the child's
If
on a sport or in a play, I mean, they probably won't have time to game on the weekdays anyway.
That's right, because then it goes back to relationships. And these relationships with people in real life are more important
Right.
than screen time. They
Right.
must be, because how are we going to grow up and live in the world? How are children going to grow up and live in the world if they're unsure how to relate and talk to people?
Right.
And so they need this valuable experience. It's important.
Mhm.
So then when we get to the weekend and they have downtime, I recommend 2 45 minutes at most. That's
Mhm.
usually enough time to play a full game. And it and if it's not, that is disappointing. But oftentimes those type of games, world building or creating, can be saved. And
Mhm.
what I advise is to set a timer, just like someone would have in a kitchen. Old
Mhm.
school timer, not on a phone, not with
Right.
Alexa. Let's not use more technology. Set the timer, let it ding. And when you hear that ding, you, at
Right.
first you're startled, you're upset, you're annoyed, but then you get used to it and you know, okay, it's time to stop.
Right.
I think it's nice to have a 5 minute warning and
For
then another
sure.
one that goes
I was
off.
gonna say, that, some kids
Oh,
have practiced and gotten better at like ending their game, even if it's a few minutes to take to end, versus the kids who are just like hysterical and truly addicted. And that
yeah.
takes practice, getting more comfortable, kind of getting away from the game or away from whatever the screen is that they're using at that time.
Yeah, we're talking about the polished result, the end product. We're not,
Mhm.
yeah, there's
No, but I like
steps
that.
along the way.
I like that
Yeah.
there's a time limit specifically. I suppose it could be a game limit if it's something that's typically under a certain amount of minutes. It might be easy to end after one game instead of starting a second one and then having to end. But that's something you could discuss with a child or teen and give them some agency in that decision. But the theme being there's still a time limit.
Yeah, there's a limit. And so, yeah, the 2 45-minute windows, limit,
Mhm.
warnings. And then if the child is, what's the way to put it, doing well,
Mhm.
let's make it a blanket term like that. They have the opportunity to earn more time in 15-minute increments, but no more than 15 or 30 minutes each window. Otherwise,
Mhm.
it gets too long and it gets confusing.
Right.
What those reward could be based on is, I don't know, chores, life skills. Oftentimes it's homework completion, attendance of
Right.
school, or activities that they were resisting or avoiding in the past.
Right.
These are things
Because
that
we know
if
it
they're
is. It's such a rewarding tool.
Mhm.
Um, and we want to have things that work to help us achieve other goals, but I like that there's again a limit. It's not like hours extra. It's 15-minute increments. That's
Yeah.
helpful.
If not, I think we wind up playing for child plays for
4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah.
And then how do you stop anyone after 4 hours from doing something? Anyone's going to be cranky, angry, dysregulated. Think of it how adults feel after they travel. It's exhausting.
Right.
Gaming, you're in a different world. Your mind is taken somewhere else. It's hard to reorganize it and reintegrate and connect with others.
Wow. And I'm not as familiar with the gaming world, Ben. What are some of the kind of more popular ones that the teens are playing
Ooh.
these days?
Oh,
And
Lee,
are they
I
all
need to
violent?
call
Or are
one of
they?
them.
Yeah.
So I think it goes across the spectrum. I think
Okay.
there's the what we'll call the shooter games, the first person shooter.
Mhm.
Yes, yeah, I agree. And I think we have sports, and then I think of world building, and I think we think of platforms now. So there's
Mhm.
consoles, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, that type of stuff, and then I think of PC. When we have PC
Okay.
gaming, that's usually a little more, we tend to find that to be a little more addicting in a different way, because that's what I call world creating. Now, I'm
Okay.
sure there's people who are shaking their head right now going, oh, facepalm, like how could he describe it that way? But that's when we're thinking of Minecraft
Yes.
or we're thinking of Roblox. Now, that's
Right.
not world building, but within Roblox, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games that are, and more being built every day. And
Right. And some
they
of
have,
those seem better than others, right? Some seem a little bit more
yes,
benign and innocent, like cute little animals, and others seem a little more concerning as a
yeah,
parent.
sometimes they're like Pong or Tetris, and sometimes they look like that. And then all of a sudden there's blood or gore dripping
Oh,
from these things.
oh,
And so
right.
it's it feels good. It's stimulating. It's scary. It gets the adrenaline jumping and coursing through your body. And that makes you want to keep playing. I had a Zoom session with a sixth grader yesterday, and he was playing a game while we were talking, and we did a shared screen over Zoom. So I got to see what he was doing, and he got to the final boss, and it shows how far along you get each stage. And he was getting right to the end, right at the end, and it kept killing him. And I had to let him know they're doing it on purpose. So you keep playing. He wanted to pick up his
Oh.
remote and throw it at the TV and scream. And to his credit, he didn't. And he understood what the game was doing, but he did not want to stop playing until he beat that boss.
So
And he had
even
already
with the
been playing for hours.
psychoeducation, like in the moment from his therapist, that's fascinating. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's still addictive in the same way.
Yeah.
It's
And
like
he
the
can
slot machine,
justify
like the
it.
next one I'm going to get the
Exactly.
$1 million hit.
Ben, I'm just going to play for another minute. Ben, I can keep justifying this. It's not a big
Mhm.
deal. Look, my parents aren't telling me to stop. They're working. This is how I keep myself entertained. What's the big deal? Why
Right.
do you care more than me? And when he refocuses the attention on me, or when children refocus their attention on their parents, people get defensive. And we think, wait, I'm not trying to harm someone. I'm not trying to inflict pain. But
Right.
that's what a corrective experience can be for a child. And so it's hard for everyone.
Right. Oh, it's very hard to parent in the world of technology, except
Sure.
when you're on an airplane. And then I wonder how the heck our parents and grandparents did it without the iPad. I always wonder, like, oh my gosh. But other
Right.
than the airplane, it really complicates matters. It's tricky, and each family has such drastically different rules, also. So
Mhm.
that's tricky to have to let go of that when your child goes to someone else's house and what are they exposed to there? And what if another child brings a device into your house? And, it's
Yeah.
tricky.
They are very tricky. And I think typically we try to go with the flow and correct
Mhm.
it later and get back
Mhm.
to that family's culture way of being. But
Right.
it is hard. These are road bumps, and we can almost think of those as relapses
Right.
because it's brought back into the
Totally.
mind. It floods the person, and they have to go to their meeting of sorts and think
Mhm.
about how to address it and come to terms with what happened and get back on a path for health.
Totally. That makes sense. Can you tell us a time that you had success, with a family you worked
Mm.
with or an individual you worked with, in terms of helping that child or helping that teen create healthy limits with screens? Because again, this sounds great, but I'd love a specific story.
Yeah, sure. I was hoping you would ask. Okay. I'm very fond of this child and the family. So um, it's very nice to talk about them. And I say that I'm fond of them so that um, you can tell how much I care. And I think that that matters when we do this type of work because there's so much vulnerability and intimacy that is shared, and
Mhm.
that type of relationship and connection is formed. So I started to work with this. So it's a 9-year old, and I consider it a success story because most recently he's reporting that his life satisfaction has improved, his relationships have improved, and his functioning across all settings of his life has improved.
Wow.
So, what does that all really mean? Okay. So, about a year and a half ago, his parents came in, reported themes of defiance, arguing, and really directing a lot of anger and frustration at his parents. They talked about how they've tried so many things to improve his self esteem, his confidence, help him make and maintain more friendships, help him feel good about who he is, help him uh, try new activities. He resisted. He liked gaming. And it makes sense. It's easy. He felt good. And it wasn't such a big deal because he was still spending time with friends. Around the holidays last year, they decided to reward him with a PlayStation 5. They thought it would be fun. And they thought, hey, the neighborhood kids will come over, just like when we were kids, people would come over, Nintendo, Sega, whatever. People will
Mhm.
want to play. However, what they didn't know was that now with online gaming, it really, people don't come over to play. They play online head to head, they play strangers. And so what happened was, well, this at the time he was 8 years old, he became what we'll call addicted. And so substance addictions, people will report that their life satisfaction decreases. With
Mhm.
gaming, that isn't always the case. But for the purposes of our conversation today, the addiction, an addiction because he was staying up late at night to play. He told his parents he was going to bed and then sneaking out at bed after bedtime to play. He
Mhm.
was trying to think of reasons to skip school to play. And
Oh.
when he did get a chance to play, he was getting so irritable, so angry. So already a child who was defiant and angry and upset and trying to find his way in life coming out of the pandemic,
Right.
it had increased to the point where his parents were alarmed. He began to throw things. He began to engage in some physical violence. He has younger siblings at the time, a 4 and a 2-year old, and they were beginning to display some physical aggression, all because they were watching him throw these tantrums after he was done playing because he couldn't beat a certain game or because it was time to stop playing. So
Mhm.
the parents talked to me, and we began to help the child understand what was happening inside their mind and why. And we wanted to take time. We wanted to spend enough time there and provide that psychoeducation so that he had some buy-in.
And
Because no
also,
matter what,
it takes the blame away from him. It's like this thing
right?
in your brain is doing this to you and to our family, and we don't like
Yeah,
it, and we wanna help you with it, but it doesn't feel like you are the problem.
that's right, Lee. We didn't want him to think that he's bad or broken. Those are
Mhm.
the typical responses that children think, right? Oh, I'm bad or broken, or there's something wrong with me. No, 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 no. There's people who are working in a building that's the size of a castle right now, coming up with a formula with an algorithm to make sure that you never stop playing this. And that as soon as you beat this game, there's another game you want to play. So
Right.
this isn't, it's about you, but it's also not about you.
Mhm.
You're part of what's happening to so many people around you.
Mhm.
And that did help. It didn't make him less irritable, but it allowed him to step away and look at it from an overview and
Right.
understand that he didn't need to internalize it
Right.
and take himself down and take
Right.
himself out and anguish over it. And
that he's not alone, like you said, that it
and then he's
normalizes
not,
this is happening to, oh my gosh, so many kids, so many grownups. It's not just you. And we want to help you with this at the same time.
yeah. And at this time, his parents did research. They
Mhm.
provided him with articles, with videos of experts talking about this. So,
Wow.
like you're saying, Lee, to really explain, we're not making this up. It's not just you. This is a phenomenon that's happening around the world,
Wow.
and especially in this country. So let's think about it together. And that got enough buy-in so that when they told him that they were taking away his PlayStation 5 and iPad for a month, he understood why. And that's what I recommend. At least 30, not at least 30 days, 30 days, not less, but 30 days a month. And that's enough time for the affect to come out, to deal with it, to experience what it's like to have it taken away, to begin to kind of go through that withdrawal. And then there's time to begin to engage in healthy activities, to spend time with friends and family, for this child to get more into basketball. And now connecting to the theme of defiance, he wanted to spend more time with his father. He needed this. And part of the PlayStation 5 was, hey, we're parents, both parents are high achievers, really lovely, wonderful people who are doing good work and wanted to keep doing good work and have good childcare. And at times they needed their kids, to entertain themselves.
Sure.
We
can all relate.
Sure, all parents can, yes. And so this father understood, hey, my son wants to spend more time with me. And when the PlayStation 5 was taken away, they had that time. And they were able to go to basketball games together. They were able to play basketball outside in the middle of winter. This kid wanted to go out and shoot hoops. The other day he was telling me it was hailing outside. I couldn't feel my fingers, but I was spending time with my dad and it was fun.
Oh, so
Whereas
it's true because you
3
can't
months
really
ago,
compete with the screens, right? Again, the way that they're set up, you could be going to Disney World. It wouldn't matter if the choice is a screen or a real life interaction. So it seems like when that is taken out of the picture for a time, in this case, the 9-year-old was really able to see what they could actually experience in real life, what they were missing.
That's right. He spent time with his grandparents. He's like, Ben, they're so old and ridiculous and silly, but they're fun. And it's nice to talk with them and hear about what life is really like and feel seen and experienced. And then that gave him a little more self-esteem to spend more time with his friends. And he was someone who tends to like to hang out with the older kids. We like dares, but now he's spending time with kids his age and he's really enjoying that. And now when he games, he says, I don't want to play for more than 45 minutes because it gets too much. I want to do something else. And
So he's able to regulate how much of the time this takes up in his life in a different way. Whereas before it was the parents fighting probably and saying you have to get off of it and so forth.
Not always, but most of the time.
Yeah.
And there are timers and warnings, but he's also inviting friends over. So the initial goal is occurring because he wants those relationships in person. And now his friends are experiencing those same relationships and those same positive experiences. And so it's clicking for them and in that friend group and in their community. So it's a really important experience. Now the younger siblings are also seeing, hey, there's other ways to have fun.
Right. It's good modeling.
Exactly. And now they're able to address the symptoms of behavior, defiance, irritability in a different way because they removed one of the variables or the triggers. So you're able to really fine tune it and address it in a different way.
So in this case, right, the family came to you and there were some clear concerns. And so it makes sense to me that you took this approach of let's take this whole, technology piece out of the life for 30 days. And he's young enough that you could do that. I guess I'm wondering, would you only do that extreme kind of 30 day no electronics in a case like that where it starts with real clear concerns? Or would you do, how people talk about like technology fasts? I forget the other term people use.
Oh, right.
Would you do that for all kids from time to time? What would you say about that?
I think there's not one size fits all. And I think we want to think of each person as an individual and what the relationship to technology is, how they're functioning in all areas of their life. And at the same time, I think technology fasts or breaks, that's healthy. That's nice. Just like anything in life, moderation, that's good. But I think if we're looking for a corrective experience, we do it once and we do it right. And that means that once we decide and we identify, we make a plan, we implement it, and we stick to it. Because if not, if we start and we stop, we're sending mixed messages to the child or to the teen. And what are they learning except from the parent? I can't do it as a parent, so I can't really expect you to do it. And then that becomes in therapy or in their life, the focus is no longer on technology, it's on their relationship. So let's keep it on technology, not on the parent-child relationship or who's in charge, who makes the rules and who follows it.
So you're saying the whole family goes on this 30-day diet fast.
Yeah, Lee, you're catching on. I try to disguise it as much as I can. But yeah, I think it's for the whole family system. And I think it gets harder as the children get older. So I've had families say, Ben, yeah, I have a 9-year-old, but what about my middle schooler? What about my high school student? What are we supposed to do? Well, and they ask for apps or different devices that they can use to turn off one person's internet or one person's device. And I know my own reaction, since I think people can tell through this how I think of technology as a tool. I don't embrace that type of thinking. I say if it's for one, it's for all in the whole family, not so that people are suffering, so that people all learn and grow together. And so if you have a high school age student who needs the internet and needs to be able to do homework at night, and you can't stop your child from using the device and you have to turn off the internet, then your high school age student needs to go to the library after school. They need to tell their teacher what's happening, and they need to come up with other accommodations. And that's for 30 days. It's not for 60 days.
Not forever. Right.
Not forever. It's for this amount of time, for 4 weeks. If something more is needed after that, then we want to talk to our professional and find out how to fine tune or tailor this to this specific individual and that family system.
It's interesting. I have had families where kids have had, again, certainly, I don't know if I could say addiction fully, but where they have those behaviors, right? Reminiscent of addiction, where they kind of are craving the next hit, that sort of thing. And when they go to camp, right, with no screens, overnight camp, that is, and they come back and they're not even asking for it. So interesting to me. And like several families have reported that, that, the kids sort of didn't miss it, even though they would have absolutely predicted that they would have been, dying for that iPad the moment they got off the bus. They didn't. So I just find that fascinating. It's kind of like one of those built-in fasts.
Yeah, Lee, that's such a great point for so many reasons. I often hear those kids at camp also say, yeah, we had a movie night and it was so weird to watch a movie. Why were we doing that? And it felt like a special treat. It was so special. Meanwhile, when they're at home, they're like, oh yeah, I went to a movie, whatever. I don't care. That's so boring.
Right.
So when we remove it a little, that tool, that device is brought back into our mind in a healthy way, and we can experience it for the way that it's really was initially designed and created, not how it's been tailored for consumerism. And yeah, those children, when they come back, that's a good time to get it started. If we're going to implement this change and this corrective action, do it after summer. But yeah, that's an example to share with the child when they're not so sure to get buy-in. Hey, do you remember summer camp? What was life like? Oh, I was around people that I liked and they liked me and that felt good. And I had things to do. Well, summer camp is a special place, but we could do something like that here.
Right.
Let's talk and let's brainstorm together. So it really is a lot of creativity, Lee. Right. Summer camp is creative. It's freedom. That's what we want to embrace here.
Right. So if you were to explain, and it sounds like you did, to this kiddo who's 9 or to siblings, this 30-day, I don't know if we call it an experiment or
let's call it experiment.
Yeah. What words would you use to explain why? You said the parents had showed videos and explained the effects on the brain. Can you kind of role play a little what you would say if you were presenting it in a session? Like, this is what we're going to do, family. Because again, I can only imagine the reactions.
Yeah. So I use the word relationship. It's a broken record because I really want them to hear that word over and over and to think what it means. And then I take them through the steps, but I really try to help them think, how do you think of your life now? And how do you think it could be different? So it's a little bit of that solution-focused therapy magical wand. If we're going to wave a magical wand over technology, what do we think could change and how could life improve? And so they begin to imagine and begin to think what it's going to be. And then I think what we do is we take a piece of paper. I have giant Post-its that I like to use, and we write out a schedule so that we can see it, we can view it, and it becomes concrete and predictable. And we know what to expect the best that we can.
Mhm.
And that way we can cope ahead.
Mhm.
And then as we're coping ahead, we begin to think, do I have those strategies to cope and manage this type of distress? Does the
Mhm.
family system? And that creates a conversation. And I think that's as detailed as we can get with this, Lee, because all the conversations are different,
Right.
but that's what we need to have. These devices take away time to have these meaningful conversations, these intentional conversations
It is. It's like a
about,
time suck from everything.
yes, yes. So we want to talk and we want to sit down. We want to explain why we're doing it, how it's going to work, what
Mhm.
it's going to feel like, how we're going to all tolerate it together, how parents are still there to care for their children and attend to
Right.
their needs and help them. And also what I'm doing in this time is really supporting parents to understand the affect that's going to come their way, the
Mhm.
anger, the outbursts, and how to help parents not take it personally and how to help them not give in, to not give in to the tantrum, not give in to the threats. And when they hear their children say the most awful things they thought they could ever hear them say or couldn't even imagine them saying, to hear it, not to punish them for it, to hold them accountable for it, but not to overdo it with a consequence
Mhm.
and continue with this goal. Because that all that behavior has meaning, and that meaning is stop, 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 or else. And we don't give in to emotional terrorism.
Mhm. Oh, I like that. Yeah. No, it's true. It's like they will do anything to get it back in that
Yeah.
moment, including, from the sweetest to the meanest, right?
Mhm.
Anything goes. Just again, just like someone who really needs that next hit. It's the same concept.
Same thing as illicit
Yeah.
substances, even legal ones, right?
Right.
It's that same idea, that same fixation, that same way that will justify and come up with reasons why and manipulate and take advantage of those who we care about, even though we're not trying to harm them. It's what this addiction is telling us to do.
Right. What are other questions, common questions that you get from parents in sessions about good rules with technology? I know I get a lot of questions about phone contracts or even iPad contracts when a child is getting a device for the first time, so that even though I know it could change as the child gets older, there's some ground rules. What are things you get commonly asked about?
Yeah. Um, should I allow my child to have social media?
Hmm.
Should they, when are they allowed to text their friends and when are they not allowed to? Where should the phone live?
Hmm.
Right. And so I think, where should the phone live? Well, when the child's not using it, I think it should be with the parent. And I think when it's being charged, it should be in the parent's room at night. So like we talked about earlier, the child's not sleeping with it and
Hmm.
creating their life around it.
Hmm.
Other type of questions, with social media, how do I know when my child's old enough? And my answer is, how should I know? How do any of us know? And my response isn't meant to be snarky, but is, what's the harm in waiting? What are they missing out on?
Hmm.
And they'll say, well, Ben, their friends are connecting this way or that way. And what I wonder is, what about a group chat? That's still
Hmm.
technology, but that's something that we can control and monitor and limit in different ways.
For sure. Well, the whole wait until 8th, I remember reading
Right.
about this and thinking, "Oh, this is incredible. What a great, brilliant idea." And you just need this critical mass of parents who agree. And then these kids absolutely aren't asking for phones or they're not missing out because their friends don't have them either, right? And I think around here on the North Shore, the average, time that the kids get phones is much earlier than 8th grade. And so it really does make
Sure.
it tricky, because you don't want your child to be the last one and truly be left out of all these, chats and plans and things like that. So I think it's a tricky balance to your point, and there isn't a uniform right or wrong answer. But it is interesting in certain communities. It does seem like they get the phones much later. And, as a parent, I'm kind of jealous, like, oh, that'd be lovely to not even have to entertain the what age thing because they're waiting till 8th. So 8th it is, right? But I
Yeah.
was just curious if you noticed sort of a trend around here, that I'm noticing with the younger kids. And I'm not saying to just give in right away and be the first either, but it is a little bit of a balancing act.
I agree, Lee. And I think if a parent can hold out, not to
Mhm.
demonstrate I'm in control or I have
Mhm.
power and you don't, but to see if the child can withstand it and see if they can
Mhm.
develop other types of relationships or other ways of communicating with their friends, I think that's beneficial. And I think the kids that do that, since they haven't had this
Mhm.
device yet, maybe they have jealousy or some envy, but they're okay because they
Yeah.
don't know what they're missing out on, and it's
Right.
healthy. So I
Right.
agree. Yeah, eighth grade. I'm thinking it happens in my experience more in fourth grade, sometimes in third grade when parents are busy and they're both working and they want to make sure that their child can communicate with them. And typically it's the anxious child. Well, I have separation anxiety. I want to know where my parent is. I just want to know that they're coming to pick me up. And I think we can all understand that and maybe even relate to that. And we have to think of another way for that
Right.
need to be met without
Right.
buying a computer that fits in their backpack
Right.
or their pocket.
Right. Well, and actually, I've had a couple of kiddos who are fairly young with separation anxiety in the practice, and they the goal was for them to have successful sleepover experiences,
Oh,
because it was a goal of theirs, especially with the girls. It seems like one of the kind of things that girls do, right, at a certain age is a fun social kind of thing is having a sleepover. And two of these girls who I'd worked with, both on the younger side, so like maybe one was third grade, one was in fifth grade. And both said, "Oh, yeah, I've had plenty of successful sleepovers." Really? Because
oh,
I was sort of surprised to hear that. And they said, "Yeah, but I have my iPad with me at all times. So I can call, they could FaceTime from the iPad from the other house at any point, and I could tell my mom to pick me up." And so they didn't really have successful sleepovers in the past, in my, opinion. It was that they physically went, but they were connected the whole time. And many times they actually did get picked up early, and the parent in charge didn't even know this was all happening. And other times they might have made it physically through the night, but they were talking the whole time on the iPad until they fell asleep. So
mm,
I said, let's challenge ourselves to do, even if it's like an undernighter, but without any strings attached, without the iPad, without calling. If you need something, the other parent is in charge. That's, whose home it is. Talk to them. And so those were really challenging steps for these two individuals to take. And they both were successful in time, but it was not easy. And I think that's a big difference too. Are you really separating and having a sleepover, or are you physically going somewhere, but you're connected? So it's interesting.
it's very interestingly, right? Because if technology is a tool, like we've talked about, what was that tool accomplishing there? It was
Right.
creating a disguised or invisible connection
Right.
that was creating more dependence. And they
Right.
thought they were accomplishing, like you said, a goal or having this fun experience, but
Yeah.
it wasn't what they thought. And so they're
Right.
left feeling disappointed or frustrated and angry at themselves. And
Right.
so parents want to support their kids, and these tools create convenience. And we think in the moment it's okay, but it's a band-aid to not deal with the upset or the worry.
Mhm.
Deal with the upset and the worry, parents. Help the child
Right.
understand it and build along the way. So yeah,
Right. So for
and
those
underwriter,
parents
that's
that
where
you're saying got the younger kids' phones because they were anxious, advice for parents who are thinking about it and have younger kids, it sounds like you're saying, hold out. Um,
let them yeah.
Let them
And then
figure out if there's another adult presumably in charge of them at all times. They're not wandering the streets alone in third grade. They can wait.
and if necessary, if they really can't, get them a flip phone.
Right. Old
That
fashioned
only
phone.
old fashioned flip phone where it's just, are you on your way? And the
Mhm.
parent replies, yes. And then you turn off your phone and
Right,
that's
right,
it.
right, for
Yeah.
sure. No, that makes sense. So we've been talking a lot about what we should do as parents, and I appreciate very much your advice. So I guess one final question I have for you is, what should we not do as parents? What pitfalls have you seen?
Oh, such a great question. I think what we've talked about today is a healthy corrective experience. What we
Mhm,
don't want to do is an overcorrection, and that would be unhealthy.
mhm,
So when I talk to parents about this, I like to compare it or do a parallel to when we introduce driving, when parents introduce driving, or talk about sex with their children. So in both instances, we want to teach about safety, danger, risk, and we want to do it in a way where they're not scared or feel ashamed to do it. So there's a healthy balance, and that's when limits come into play. So that's why some parents will say, Ben, 30 days, we'll do it 60. No, don't do that. That's punitive. And what they're learning is I did something bad. I'm bad or broken.
Mm-hmm.
And another overcorrection could be, well, okay, I'll introduce it, but they're not allowed to ever have social media. Well, that means that they're probably going to come up with a secret way to come up with it or a fake name. And so we're creating an obstacle that didn't exist before.
Right. And ever is a long time.
Forever. What does that even mean?
Right. It's very
So that's
black
that
or white,
parent
all or
saying,
nothing thinking.
yeah, that's an extension of the parent's anxiety and worry of, is this really going to work? If we bring it back, what if it doesn't? And so we have to give it a chance. And that's, I appreciate that you use the word experiment, because that's what this is.
Mm-hmm.
So the goal is one time. If it doesn't work after one time, we don't overcorrect it. We go back and we fine tune it and we adjust. Maybe it doesn't need to be taken away, but there's more limits put on it.
Right.
Or there's more support system.
Right. Because they're showing you they're not ready yet to have, the full access, whatever that looks like. Right.
That's right. Same as if they would say, okay, now that they have it back, they can use it in an unlimited amount of time.
Right.
Because they've learned their lesson and it will be fine. No, we continue to maintain, we continue to monitor, and we continue to make sure that by the time they launch from home, that they have a healthy relationship with these devices, that they know how to use them, and that they don't feel they need to punish themselves if it goes too far.
Right. No, this really reminds me of when people talk about diet, because I had the nutritionist Lara Field on, and she was talking about how you can't tell kids never to have dessert or ice cream or sweets.
Right.
That's not realistic, and it's okay to enjoy them, but again, in moderation. And so it seems like technology is no different, that as parents, we have to really be careful about both what we're modeling. Like, are we attached to technology ourselves, 24 hours a day? Are we able to put down our device and really engage in a meal together or an activity? And again, that we can't ban it either as much as we might like to, because it's part of the world we live in and it's part of how kids connect and learn and all kinds of things. But again, just sort of figuring out what that healthy medium is, that healthy amount.
That's right, Lee. An example that popped in my head was a popular birthday party to have for children is the video game truck comes by or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Should the child not be allowed to go to the birthday party or go to the sleepover? No, but we just plan ahead. They don't have to tell their friends what their limits are. Not that it's a secret. They just don't have to over-explain.
Right.
And then when they come home, they resume the plan and they make sense of it.
Of
and
course.
if it's hard, they have a chance to talk about it.
Right.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for everything. This has been really helpful. And I hope everyone will, check out more episodes of our podcast. Go to copingpartners.com and click on podcast and articles. And thank you again, Ben.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Coping Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes. And check out our podcast page at copingpartners.com.